So there's a big myth that I want to dispel right up front because a lot of people with diverticular disease, and particularly those who have had an episode of diverticulitis, are concerned about eating things like seeds, popcorn, and nuts for fear that they will lodge into these diverticuli and block it, and cause um, a flare up. And in fact, this is a myth. There was a prospective cohort study of a very large group of male healthcare professionals who were evaluated over 18 years, and there was no association between diverticulitis, diverticular bleeding in association with the consumption of seeds, nuts, and popcorns. And in fact, interestingly, those foods were associated with a reduced risk of diverticulitis because they're fiber, and we'll get to the importance of fiber in a little bit. Okay, let's talk about the integrative approach. Now, before we can get into what to do about this, we really need to learn more about the mucosa. In my view, the best opportunity that we have to prevent diverticulitis in people with diverticular disease is to support a healthy mucosa. So the mucosal layer is in the intestine, and it's considered to be comprised of everything starting with this thin muscular layer, then connective tissue, and then the epithelium. And within and on top of the epithelium is mucus. What happens if our mucosal layer is disrupted? We see some problems. So the colonic mucosal layer tends to be, generally speaking, decreased and more porous when there's inflammatory conditions, especially ulcerative colitis. We see the inner layer, which is supposed to be sterile, is actually allows for microbial penetration, which changes which basically creates an immunoinflammatory condition in the colon. When people have active colitis, immune cells upregulate goblet cells to produce mucus, but ultimately those goblet cells literally exhaust themselves. They totally empty out, and they can't create more mucus. So one of the treatments for active colitis, for ulcerative colitis, are sort of immunosuppressants. And one of the reasons that works is because when we dampen this immune stimulation, we allow the goblet cells to rest and recover, refill up essentially with mucus that they can then extrude. So let's go back now to diverticulitis. So as I said earlier, very common, especially as we get older. This is the acute inflammation of these colonic outpouchings. And this was a study of adult females, over 50,000 women, who did not have diverticulitis at baseline. Over time, out of that group, just over 4,000 had diverticulitis diagnosed. And they looked at food intake in comparison. And what they found was that those who were in the highest quintile of fiber intake, specifically from fruit and cereals, not vegetables, interestingly, was associated with a 24% reduced incidence of diverticulitis. And specifically, each daily serving of an apple, a pear, prunes, or any other whole fruit was each associated with a 5% reduced risk of diverticulitis over time. So this is a really good argument in favor of fruit and in favor of cereals or grains. Vegetables, although they are helpful, have a lot more insoluble fiber, are a little less full of these more mucopolysaccharide type of fibers, less water in them. The water content is in proportion to the kind of fiber in the food. So maybe that's why. But bottom line, people with a tendency towards diverticulitis would benefit from fruit and grain consumption.